welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 7 of Kill la Kill. If you'd like to watch along, start watching now. So, here we have a scene where Ryuko's sort of hanging out with Mako's family, and they're all sharing a meal together. And it really just seems like there's no, ulterior anything going on. It's just them sharing a meal and enjoying each other's company. I guess it sort of serves to contrast the previous episodes, which were fraught with conflict. So I guess for Ryuko, this family dinner is sort of an oddity for her, considering her lack of a family. So this is two scenes we've had where things have started with eating and a focus on Mako's mother's cooking. Of course, it's very quickly interrupted by the captain of the knife throwing club. So to no one's surprise, he's pretty quickly defeated. But before Ryuko can even really relax, another club attacks. So again, this guy doesn't really put up much of a fight. So I'm noticing a pattern here of all these 2-star Goku uniform having club captain peons. You know, they're nominally club captains, but in reality, they're, I guess, pretty lacking in comparison to some of the former club captains that Ryuko has fought. So according to Mako, this is sort of like the mandate of Satsuki saying that, you know, if you beat Ryuko, good things for you guys. So a bunch of clubs are sort of splitting up into a greater number of highly specific clubs in order to try and cash in on this. So Ryuko tries to game the system and set up her own fight club. The idea being she can sort of streamline the process and fight everyone at a set time rather than have people waylay her in the streets. Gamaguri, the chair of the disciplinary committee, is initially truculent to approve the club, but by mandate of Satsuki, he really has no choice but to obey. So while Satsuki allows this, she's clearly aware that Ryuko is deliberately trying to game the system. But, Satsuki's not foolish. Gamagori sort of offers Ryuko the Faustian bargain, "Are you really sure you want to be the captain of the club?" And when she says yes, he starts laying out the paperwork. So it's quickly becoming clear that Satsuki wants to crush Ryuko under the weight of bureaucracy. So the weight of all the responsibilities of being a club captain is more than enough to make Ryuko balk. In fact, she balks so much that she shifts responsibility over to Mako, making her the club captain instead. So the issue here is that Mako now has considerably greater responsibility. The trade-off is that as a club captain, she'll eventually gain more prestige in Honnoji Academy. So I guess at the first official Fight Club meeting, Ryuko is taking on the line dancing club. We've got like a nice sort of montage here of the ongoings of the club. On the one hand, Ryuko's defeating all these clubs wholesale, and on the other hand, Mako has to suffer under the work of being a club captain, filling out all the paperwork, attending the meetings, submitting expense reports, all kinds of horrible things. But ultimately, the work is paid off. The Mankancho family now has a condo befitting a one-starred student. So they now live in luxury that is utterly incomparable to how they were living before. And even then, the way they live isn't utterly insane and, I guess, exorbitant. It seems like decidedly middle class, but to them, it's incomparable to how they were living before. So, because we're seeing this, this is, I guess, a really good explanation of the difference between no stars and one stars and all that. So now that they're having dinner, Mako's mom notes that, for the first time they can finally have croquettes with real beef and pork rather than the undisclosed meat that they sort of refused to acknowledge openly before. So at this point in time, Mako and Ryuko are still feeling good about the club. The happiness of Mako's family is all that really matters to them at this point. It makes all the suffering worth it. So, having taken note of how much her life and her family's life has improved, Mako is now determined to make things even better for her family, at any and all costs. So, as they continue to beat clubs and attend meetings, Mako is taking a more studious approach, whereas before she was on the verge of falling asleep in meetings. She's now actively participating in throwing everything she has into the work. So now, the Mankancho family standard of living has increased once again, and they sort of have their own mansion on the second layer of the city. And almost like day and night, the dynamic has changed entirely. They live in abject luxury. And just like that, everybody has gone from being ecstatic to being absolutely miserable. The family isn't even eating dinner together as a family. And there's sort of these contrasting shots of the empty dining room table with lavish food and a picture of the family together with Ryuko. So now Mako shows up and she's sort of wearing a suit and sunglasses, kind of like a stereotypical talent agent. And so as she's showing up, she's sort of telling Ryuko, here's your schedule. You're going to the gym after dinner. I've got you booked for fights the next few days. It's going to be busy. And outwardly, Mako is still amiable, but the dynamic is still changed so significantly that for Ryuko, it's like the adoptive family she had found now no longer exists. So the next day, Ryuko is informed that she's going to be fighting everybody in this gym. And realistically, we know it's probably not going to be that big a deal for her, but it's made to look like it's a tall order. So, Mako's family are really living it up, indulging in wine, women, and in Mataro's case, chocolate. Even their dog, Guts, is indulging. And while Mako's sort of attending to the goings-on of the club, Ryuko is working herself to the bone, fighting and fighting and fighting. And despite how easy the individual fights are, it's clearly starting to take a toll on her. So, thanks to how well the Fight Club is doing, Mako has even gained the ability to sort of backtalk Jakuzure, one of the council chairs. So, while the council chairs are sort of questioning the recent happenings, Satsuki is telling them all to relax. So, clearly Satsuki knows more than she's letting on. She suspects that things are going to go her way. And considering how the family dynamic has changed, even if she's not aware of that, she has a point. So this is how, I guess, important a family is. Like, Ryuko is clearly not taking this well. She's even distraught that the boys aren't peeping in on her in the bath like they were before. Maybe disappointed isn't the right term, but I guess she's surprised they aren't. You know, even as like a standalone episode, I think there's something very profound about the story that it's trying to tell. So now we get to the crux of the issue. Ryuko tells Mako that she's quitting the club. So, tellingly, the thing Mako is most worried about is being sent back to the slums where she used to live. She doesn't care, at least initially, about how Ryuko feels. And so before they can really get into a verbal conflict, Satsuki intervenes and delivers a 2-star Goku uniform for Mako's use. Satsuki also sweetens the deal, saying that if Mako can defeat Ryuko, she'll earn herself a 3-star uniform as well, putting her on par with the council chairs. No, I assume that that's really not a reward anyone would take lightly. So Mako takes Satsuki up on her offer. And interestingly, I really like the design of Mako's Goku uniform. It's kind of got a Jotaro Kujo vibe from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Of course, Jotaro was based off of like the stereotypical punk delinquent kind of style. But in Mako's uniform, it even has the sort of torn hat / hair sort of deal going on, where it's not clear where the hat ends and the hair begins. It's always nice to see people paying homage to JoJo now and then. Especially when it's subtle and not particularly heavy-handed. So at least initially in the fight, Ryuko is not treating this like any other fight she's taken. So Ryuko acts out of concern for Mako's family, but just like Mako, they're only concerned about their own personal standing. So they want to see Mako beat Ryuko just as much as Mako wants to beat Ryuko. Satsuki makes the claim that what's going on here is merely the product of human nature, that humans are weak creatures incapable of acting beyond their own petty self-interest, and thus they need to be ruled. And given what's going on, Satsuki's making a pretty compelling argument. As the fight continues, Mako's clearly taking things seriously, whereas Ryuko is not. In fact, she's decided to de-transform deliberately. I guess it's an active resolve to declare that she doesn't want to fight her friends. At this point in time, Mako doesn't have the same conviction. And she's willing to beat Ryuko even though she's not fighting back. Now, up until this point, this is probably like the biggest beating we've ever seen Ryuko take. The fights lasted probably a couple hours by this point, considering how The sun is now setting, that little transition. But as the fight wears on, Mako is slowly losing her resolve to fight. And ultimately she stops just short of punching Ryuko one last time. Mako is the one who came to the realization first. She declares, "What kind of parents are you? If you could just watch as I beat my friend half to death." Now, Mako also acknowledges that past the first upgrade to their living situation, none of them were truly happy. It was merely greed. So that one last punch Mako threw at the ground sort of reveals that she wasn't really fighting seriously either, considering the large crater her punch made. So Mako willingly surrenders, gives up her Goku uniform, and demotes herself back to 0 star. She disrobes and allows Ryuko to destroy her Goku uniform with the scissor blade. And interestingly, it erupts into fireworks when it gets torn up. I think that's a nice touch. And curiously, there was a brief shot of Satsuki watching the fireworks and turning away. And when she did that, she smiled. So it seems to me that despite everything that transpired, she wasn't dissatisfied with this outcome either. Although it wasn't like a devious smile, it was more of like a genuine smile. So just like the beginning of the episode, Ryuko and Mako's family eat dinner around their tiny table back in their slum apartment. And even though the food is made of meat from an undisclosed source, it tastes much better than the super rich food they were eating in the lap of luxury. So Satsuki reveals her medal. It turns out it was all a ruse. If the Fight Club was able to beat all the other clubs of Honnouji Academy, then they were weak. So this was merely an exercise to prune the weak branches from Honnouji Academy's hypothetical tree. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next episode.